protect those I love, I must become stronger.
Have you ever wondered about the history of The Legend of Zelda? If you're a gamer, or even just someone who exists in the general vicinity of the gaming world, chances are you've heard of The Legend of Zelda. With its iconic green-clad hero, fantastical landscapes, and mind-bending puzzles, The Legend of Zelda has become one of the most beloved franchises in video game history. It's not just a series of games, it's an epic saga of adventure, courage, and sometimes smashing every vase in sight to collect a few rupees. But how did The Legend of Zelda become the titan of gaming that it is today? Let's dive into the entertaining, sometimes wacky, and always fascinating history of this legendary series. I'm Keith, and this is History Wonder. Our story begins in the early 1980s with a man who would become one of the most influential figures in video game history, Shigeru Miyamoto. As a young designer at Nintendo, Miyamoto had already struck gold with Donkey Kong and Super Mario Bros., but he had something different in mind for his next project. Rather than a game with linear progression, he wanted to create an open world where players could explore at their own pace, something revolutionary at the time. The inspiration came from Miyamoto's childhood experiences exploring the forests and caves around his home in Kyoto, Japan. Released in 1986 for the Famicom Disk System in Japan and the NES in the US in 1987, The Legend of Zelda offered players a groundbreaking experience. It was one of the first games that allowed players to roam freely in a vast world, finding items, solving puzzles, and battling enemies as they pleased. This was no simple arcade-style platformer, this was an adventure. Players took control of Link, a courageous young boy tasked with rescuing Princess Zelda from the evil sorcerer Ganon. The plot was simple, but the gameplay was anything but. The Legend of Zelda introduced what would become one of the most iconic video game items of all time, the Triforce. Well, actually, it was only two pieces of the Triforce, but who's counting? The game also gave players a save feature, which was a huge deal at the time. No more writing down passwords on scraps of paper and losing them under the couch. It was a monumental moment in gaming, even if it meant players would spend weeks wandering aimlessly around dungeons with no map in sight. After the success of the original Legend of Zelda, Nintendo followed it up in 1987 with Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link. But let's be honest, things got a little weird. Unlike its predecessor, Zelda 2 was part RPG, part side-scroller, and it confused the heck out of a lot of players. It introduced experience points, magic spells, and even a life system, but it wasn't exactly the sequel fans were expecting. Zelda 2 is often seen as the black sheep of the series, but in hindsight, it laid some groundwork for future titles, particularly in terms of combat. Fast forward to 1991, and Nintendo released what many still consider one of the best games of all time, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, SNES. It brought the series back to its top-down roots and refined the formula in every possible way. This time, the game introduced the concept of parallel worlds, one light and one dark, which added a whole new layer to the exploration and puzzle-solving mechanics. It was also the first game to feature the Master Sword, a weapon that would go on to become just as iconic as Link himself. The story was bigger, the dungeons more intricate, and the puzzles more challenging. Players could now switch between the light world and dark world, which meant you could get stuck twice as often. But seriously, A Link to the Past was a masterclass in game design, balancing exploration, action, and puzzle solving in a way that few games had achieved before. In 1998, The Legend of Zelda made the leap to 3D with Ocarina of Time for the Nintendo 64, and let's just say it did not disappoint. Often hailed as one of the greatest video games of all time, Ocarina of Time took the series to new heights, both figuratively and literally. Players could now traverse vast fields, climb mountains, and dive into lakes, all in glorious 3D. The game introduced us to iconic locations like Hyrule Field, Kakariko Village, and Zora's Domain, while the narrative took on a more cinematic scope. But the real star of the show was time travel. In Ocarina of Time, players controlled Link as both a young boy and an adult, with the fate of Hyrule hanging in the balance. The game featured revolutionary mechanics like Z-targeting, which made combat in a 3D space manageable for the first time. And then, there was the ocarina, a magical musical instrument that allowed players to play songs with the power to alter time, summon rain, and call up their trusty horse Epona. There's a special place in every Zelda fan's heart for Ocarina of Time. Whether it was sneaking around Gerudo Fortress or getting jump-scared by Redeads in Hyrule Castletown, the game was packed with memorable moments. Plus, it introduced one of the series' most beloved villains, Ganondorf, the humanoid form of Ganon. After the success of Ocarina of Time, fans eagerly awaited the next installment. Nintendo delivered, but with a twist. Majora's Mask, released in 2000, was unlike any Zelda game before or since. Set in the mysterious world of Termina, not Hyrule, and with a dark, apocalyptic tone, Majora's Mask was a risk that paid off. The game gave players just 3 in-game days to stop the moon from crashing into the world, using a repeating time cycle to solve puzzles and complete quests. Whereas Ocarina of Time was a grand, sweeping adventure, Majora's Mask was more intimate and weird. Link could transform into different creatures by wearing masks, each with unique abilities. The game's intricate side quests, creepy atmosphere, and haunting themes made it a cult classic, and it remains a favorite for fans who enjoy Zelda's darker, more experimental side. Also, the moon's face was terrifying. In 2002, Nintendo threw fans yet another curveball with The Legend of Zelda, the Wind Waker for the GameCube. After the more realistic graphics of Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, fans were expecting the next Zelda to look even more realistic. Instead, Nintendo unveiled a game with a cel-shaded, cartoonish art style. Some fans were outraged, calling it Zelda for babies. Oh, how wrong they were. The Wind Waker turned out to be one of the most beautiful and innovative Zelda games yet. Set in a world covered by an endless ocean, players sailed the seas in their trusty boat, King of Red Lions, exploring islands, dungeons, and secret treasures. The art style wasn't just charming, it gave the game a timeless quality that still holds up today. The story of the Wind Waker was deeply connected to Ocarina of Time, revealing that the great flood that covered the world was a result of the events of the earlier game. Link may have been a little more toon-like and silly, but he was still as courageous as ever, taking on the forces of evil with his trusty Master Sword. By 2006, Nintendo decided to go dark again with Twilight Princess for the GameCube and Wii. This was the gritty Zelda fans had been clamoring for since Ocarina of Time. The game featured a more realistic art style, a massive open world, and a plot that involved Link transforming into a wolf and teaming up with the mysterious and snarky Midna. Twilight Princess was notable for its motion controls on the Wii, allowing players to swing Link's sword by waving the Wii remote. While the controls weren't perfect, the game was a massive hit and gave players some of the most memorable dungeons and boss fights in Zelda history. After years of innovation, The Legend of Zelda reached a new peak in 2017 with Breath of the Wild for the Nintendo Switch. This game wasn't just a sequel, it was a revolution. Taking the open world concept introduced in the original Zelda game and expanding it beyond anyone's wildest dreams, Breath of the Wild allowed players to explore the vast land of Hyrule in any way they saw fit. Gone were the linear dungeons of old. Now players could tackle the game's challenges in any order, or even head straight for Calamity Ganon from the start. With physics-based puzzles, a massive world to explore, and countless secrets to uncover, Breath of the Wild breathed new life into the franchise. It also became the best-selling Zelda game of all time. And let's not forget the cooking. Who knew that one day we'd all be obsessed with making virtual recipes in a Zelda game? The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom is a direct sequel to Breath of the Wild. Set in the expansive kingdom of Hyrule, the game follows Link as he faces a new threat after the resurrection of Ganondorf, an ancient evil. With Princess Zelda missing and Hyrule once again in peril, Link explores both the surface world and a mysterious sky realm filled with new islands. The game introduces innovative mechanics like fusing objects and ultra hand building, offering new ways to solve puzzles and battle enemies in an expansive, open-world environment. The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom is an exciting new entry in the iconic Zelda series where Princess Zelda takes center stage. According to Nintendo, when rifts mysteriously appear across Hyrule, swallowing parts of the kingdom and even the heroic Link, this time it's up to Zelda to restore balance. Armed with the Tri-Rod and accompanied by a magical creature named Tri, Zelda can create echoes of objects and enemies to solve puzzles and battle foes creatively. Along her journey, she explores dangerous dungeons and the enigmatic Still World, using new abilities like Bind and Reverse Bond to overcome obstacles and uncover secrets. From its humble beginnings as an 8-bit adventure to the sprawling open world of Breath of the Wild, The Legend of Zelda has consistently pushed the boundaries of what video games can be. Whether you're solving a puzzle in a dungeon, battling Ganon for the umpteenth time, or just cutting grass for rupees, Zelda has always been about one thing: adventure. As we look to the future with even more sequels, it's clear that Zelda isn't going anywhere. Link, Zelda, and Ganon will continue their epic struggle, and we'll all be along for the ride, smashing pots, solving puzzles, and maybe even rescuing the princess again. Thanks for watching. What topics in history have you wondered about? Comment below and let us know what videos you would like to see. And be sure to like and subscribe.